This video was made possible thanks to the support of our amazing patrons. We couldn't do this without you.
Don't forget that you can support the channel for free and receive 10% off orders over $10 at Flipside Gaming by using the promo code Affinity at the checkout. Or if TCG Player or Magic Madhouse are more your thing, then be sure to place your order through our affiliate links in the description. Once again, at no extra cost to yourselves.
Hello everybody, welcome back to another EDH gameplay video brought to you by Affinity for Commander. My name is Martin.
And my name is Alex.
Today we are joined by Angelo, a writer over at edhrec.com who has an obsession with the Jeskai colour combination. We are also joined by Chris, better known as Commander Mechanic here on YouTube. We'd like to give a huge thank you to both of these lovely gentlemen for joining us for this game, and we had a lot of fun playing with them. As always, links to both our guest social media accounts will be in the video description, so feel free to check both of them out after the game. For now though, let's take a look at those opening hands. I'm playing my Korvold Fae-Cursed King Sacrifice deck. I keep an opening hand consisting of Caustic Caterpillar, Ramming Up Excavator, Phyrexian Altar, Shattergang Brothers, Command Tower and Opal Palace.
I am playing my Zaxara X-Costed Spells deck. My opening hand contains Endless One, Arcane Signet, Inspiring Call, Putrefy, Ferocious Hydra, Hinterland Harbour and Polluted Delta.
Angelo is playing his Sevinne the Chronoclasm Flashback deck. He keeps the hand of Faithless Looting, Jace Vryn's Prodigy, Dovin's Veto, Kai Carwin's Fury, Deep Analysis, a Plains and a Mountain.
And finally, Chris is playing his Kalamax the Stormsire Instant Speed deck. His starting hand is made up of Dire Fleet Daredevil, Pull from Tomorrow, Thrill of Possibility, Seedborn Muse, Misty Rainforest, an Island and a Forest.
I win the die roll and start the game off by playing Command Tower. With nothing more to do, I pass to Chris.
Chris plays Misty Rainforest, immediately paying 1 life and sacrificing the fetch land. He puts Steam Vents into play tapped, and then passes the turn.
Alex plays Polluted Delta, paying 1 life and searching his library for Watery Grave. He has the land enter tapped and ends his turn.
Angelo plays a Mountain and casts Faithless Looting. He draws 2 cards, discards 2 cards and passes to Martin.
I play Opal Palace and cast Caustic Caterpillar before passing the turn.
Chris plays an Island and passes without casting anything.
Alex plays Hinterland Harbour and casts Arcane Signet. He then ends his turn.
Angelo plays a Plains and casts Young Pyromancer. Out of mana, he passes to Martin.
I play Golgari Guildgate and then move to combat. I attack Alex with my Caterpillar, dealing him 1 damage and then pass the turn.
Chris plays a Forest and casts Soul Ring. He then ends his turn, leaving plenty of mana open for instant speed shenanigans.
Alex plays Command Tower and casts Kiora's Follower. With nothing left to do, he passes to Angelo.
Angelo draws, misses his land drop, and passes the turn.
I play a Swamp and cast Shattergang Brothers. Moving to combat, I attack Chris with my Insect and then end my turn. Chris responds by casting Thrill of Possibility, discarding a card and drawing 2 new ones. Chris then proceeds to his turn.
Chris plays a Forest, casts Twinning Staff, and passes to me.
Alex misses his land drop and casts his commander, Zaxara the Exemplary. Out of mana, he passes the turn.
Angelo plays Irrigated Farmland and ends his turn.
I begin my turn by casting Sakura Tribe Elder and then move to combat. I attack Chris with my Caterpillar, dealing him 1 damage, and then sacrifice the baby butterfly to destroy Chris's Twinning Staff. Kind of asked for that one, my friend. Happy with my turn, I pass to Chris.
Chris plays Yavimaya Coast and casts his commander, Kalamax the Stormsire. With nothing more to do, he passes the turn.
Alex begins his turn by casting Endless One, where X is 4. Zaxara's ability triggers, making a 0/0 Hydra token which enters with 4 +1/+1 counters on it, and Alex ends his turn.
Angelo casts Jace Vryn's Prodigy and passes to Martin. Chris responds to this by casting Pyrokinesis. exiling Dire Fleet Daredevil instead of paying its mana cost. He chooses to deal 3 damage to Martin's Shattergang brothers and deal 1 damage to young Pyromancer, and Angelo responds to this by casting Swords to Plowshares, exiling Kalamax. Young Pyromancer's ability triggers, creating a 1/1 elemental, Chris gains 4 life, and the Goblin Duo and Pyromancer are destroyed. Interruptions over, Martin proceeds to his turn.
In my turn, I cast Grave Pact, causing the rest of the table to boo in disapproval.
Boo.
Happy with their reactions, I pass the turn.
Chris plays a mountain and ends his turn. Looks like the Grave Pact is going to be a bit of a problem for our dear mechanic.
Alex casts Ferocious Hydra, where X is 2, creating a 2/2 Hydra with the commander's ability. He then uses the creature's ETB to fight my Elder, to which I respond by sacrificing him to his own ability. Grave Pact triggers, Alex sacrifices his newly created Hydra, Angelo sacrifices his Elemental, and I search my library for a mountain before putting it into play tapped. Moving to combat, Alex attacks me with Seldrazi and a 4/4 Hydra, dealing me 8 damage, and then passes to Angelo.
Angelo begins his turn by activating Jace's ability, drawing and discarding a card. He then plays Arid Mesa, immediately paying a life and sacrificing the land to put a Volcanic Island into play from his library. Now that is some serious swag. Finally in possession of a reasonable amount of mana, Angelo casts Smothering Tithe, and passes the turn.
I refuse to pay the Smothering Tithe tax, allowing Angelo to create a treasure token, and then cast my commander, Korvold, Fae-Cursed King. I sacrifice a mountain to his ETB, drawing a card, creating another treasure for Angelo, and putting a +1/+1 counter on my dragon. With nothing more to do, I end my turn.
Chris allows Angelo to make a treasure and recasts his commander. With 2 blue mana open, he passes to me.
Alex starts his turn by letting Angelo create a treasure, and then casts Inspiring Call. He draws 3 cards, gives Endless One Ferocious Hydra and his Hydra token indestructible, and gifts Angelo with 3 more treasure tokens. This is going to get out of hand very quickly. Alex then plays a forest and moves to combat. He attacks Angelo with all 3 of his indestructible creatures, dealing him 10 damage, and passes the turn.
Angelo begins his turn by activating Jace's ability, drawing and discarding a card. This causes Jace to transform into Jace Telepath Unbound, and Angelo plays Temple of Epiphany. He scribes the top card of his library to the bottom, and then casts Blasphemous Act, dealing 13 damage to everyone's creatures. Not yet finished, Angelo activates Jace's +1 ability with no targets, and casts Kyaikar, Wind's Fury. Happy with his plays, Angelo ends his turn.
I let Angelo create a treasure token in my draw step and cast Spring Bloom Druid. I sacrifice a swamp, search my library for a forest and a mountain, and put the lands into play tapped. If only my commander was still out to witness that. Next I cast Viscera Seer, giving me access to an instant speed sack outlet, and pass to Chris. Chris responds to this by casting Opt, keeping the top card of his library where it is, and then draws a card. Angelo creates another treasure, and Chris proceeds to his turn.
Chris lets Angelo make a treasure and play Survivor's Encampment. Wary of Martin's Grave Pact, he then passes the turn, and I respond to this by casting Putrefy. I target Kyaikar, and Angelo counters the spell with a sneaky Dovin's Veto. Kyaikar's ability triggers, creating a 1/1 spirit with flying, and I move to my turn.
Alex doesn't pay the Smothering Tithe tax, casts Krufix, God of Horizons, and ends his turn. Shame about missing that land drop again.
Angelo plays Sea of Clouds and casts his commander, Sevinne the Chronoclast. Next he pays 3 life and flashes back the Deep Analysis in his graveyard. Sevinne's ability triggers, copying the spell, and Kyaikar triggers, making a spirit. Angelo then draws 4 cards and activates Jace's +1 ability. He gives Viscera a -2/-0 and passes to Martin.
I don't pay the 2 for Smothering Tithe and cast Ramunap Excavator. I play a swamp from my graveyard, which then gives me enough mana to cast Woestrider. The horror creates a very concerned looking goat, and I move to combat. Here I attack Alex with my druid, dealing him 1 damage, and pass the turn. Chris responds to this by casting Commune with Lava, where X equals 7. He exiles the top 7 cards of his library, which he is able to play until the end of his next turn, and proceeds to his turn.
Chris allows Angelo to make a treasure, play his command tower, and cast the Frantic Search that he just exiled. He draws 2, discards 2, untaps 3 lands, and lets Angelo create 2 more treasure tokens. So much treasure. Next, Chris casts Chord of Calling, where X is 3. He searches his library for Reclamation Sage, targeting Grave Pact with their ETB, and Martin responds by sacrificing his goat to Viscera. He scries 1, keeping the top card of his library where it is, and Chris taps Reclamation Sage with Survivor's Encampment, adding a green mana to his mana pool. Grave Pact's ability then resolves, causing Angelo to sacrifice his spirit, and Chris to sacrifice his sage. The pact is then destroyed, and Chris casts the Bloom Tender that was exiled by Commune with Lava. Still not finished, Chris casts the exiled Baral, Chief of Compliance, and ends his turn.
Alex lets Angelo create a treasure, and in an act of pure desperation, casts Stroke of Genius where X is 2. Desperate times call for desperate measures, I guess. He draws 2 cards, gifting Angelo with 2 more treasures, and plays Blighted Woodland. Alex then discards down to 7 and passes to Angelo.
Angelo plays Sun-Baked Canyon and casts Ignite the Future. He exiles the top 3 cards of his library, casts the Zahili Sublime Artificer that he just exiled, and creates a 1/1 spirit with Kaikar. Next, he casts the Talisman of Creativity that he exiled, creating a 1/1 servo token with Sahili's ability, as well as another spirit with his Bird Wizard. Still not finished, Angelo activates Jace's +1 ability, giving a Woe Strider -2/-0, and then moves to combat. He attacks me with Sevinne and Kaikar, dealing me 5 damage, and passes the turn.
I don't pay for the Smothering Tithe tax, play a mountain from my graveyard, and recast my commander. I sacrifice a mountain to the Dragon's ETB, putting a +1/+1 counter on Korvold and drawing a card. Angelo creates another treasure, and I move to combat, attacking Alex with Woe Strider and ramming up Excavator. He takes 5 damage, and I end my turn.
Why was I getting all this hate?
Because you had no creatures in play?
Rude. Chris provides Angelo with another treasure token and recasts his commander. Next, he uses Survivor's Encampment to tap his dinosaur for a green mana and uses it to help cast Seaborn Muse. Angelo responds to this by casting Chemister's Insight, triggering Sahili, triggering Kaikar, and drawing 2 cards, triggering me. The Muse then resolves and Chris passes to me. I respond by storing a mana with Krufix and then move to my turn.
Chris untaps in Alex's untap phase, and Angelo creates another treasure. Alex then plays a forest and casts Kadama's Reach, searching his library for an island and a swamp. He puts the island onto the battlefield tapped, the swamp into his hand, and passes the turn. Angelo responds by flashing back Chemist's Insight, copying the spell of his commander's ability. Sahili and Kaikar both trigger, and Chris responds by casting Pull from Tomorrow, where X is 12. The spell is copied by Kalamax, who gets a +1/+1 counter for his hard work, and Chris draws 24 cards and discards 2. Angelo then creates 24 treasure tokens, fixing his mana for the rest of the game, and draws 4 cards from his own spell. Not yet finished doing things in Alex's end step, Angelo cycles Raugen Triome and then proceeds to his turn.
Chris untaps in Angelo's untap step, and Angelo plays the plateau that he exiled last turn. Next, he casts Skull Clamp, making a servo and a spirit, and flashes back Ignite the Future. Sahili and Kaikar trigger once again, and Sevinne copies the spell as well. Not liking the sound of this, Chris casts Beast Within, copying the spell with his commander. He puts a +1/+1 counter on the Elemental Dinosaur, destroys Smothering Tithe, and destroys Jace, replacing them with 3/3 Beast tokens. With Ignite the Future still on the stack, Chris casts Electro Dominance, where X is 3. He targets Kaikar with a spell, and Angelo sacrifices all 5 of his spirits to add 5 red mana to his mana pool before the spell resolves, and Kaikar is then destroyed by a bolt of electricity. Chris then misreads Electro Dominance, thinking that allows him to cast a card from his graveyard for free rather than his hand, and uses it to cast Frantic Search. Oops. He draws 2, discards 2, and untaps 3 lands, and Angelo finally gets to resolve his spell. Ha! Only joking. Chris casts Delay, targeting the copy of Ignite the Future. Given that the copy cannot be exiled with time counters on it, it simply ceases to exist, turning Delay into a literal counterspell. Now that is a big brain play if I've ever seen one. Chris draws and discards with Baral's ability. Angelo creates a servo and a spirit with the trigger that went on the stack a very long time ago. He then finally gets to resolve Ignite the Future, exiling the top 3 cards of his library, and casts Molten Disaster, where X is 7. Angelo kicks the spell, preventing it from being countered, and Martin responds to this by sacrificing 4 creatures to Viscera Seer. He scries 1 4 times, draws 4 cards, and puts 4 +1/+1 counters on his dragon. Every creature other than Korvold, Sevinne, and Angelo's spirit are then destroyed, and Angelo casts the Teferi Time Raveler that he just exiled, creating his servo with Saheeli. Not liking the idea of being unable to cast his spells at instant speed, Chris responds to this by casting Noxious Revival. He puts the Chord of Calling in his graveyard on top of his library, and the Planeswalker resolves. Not yet finished, Angelo casts his exiled Soul Ring, creating another servo, followed by Primal Amulet, making yet another servo. Still not finished, Angelo casts Arcane Signet, and Saheeli pumps out another servo. He then casts Boros Signet, making another servo, followed by Talisman of Progress, creating, you guessed it, another servo. I think you have enough mana rocks there, my friend. Angelo then activates Teferi's -3 ability, returning Korvold to Martin's hand, and draws a card. He then casts Ral's Storm Conduit, using his +2 ability to scry the top card of his library to the bottom. Moving to combat, Angelo attacks Chris with his commander, dealing him 2 damage, and finally ends his turn.
I play a forest and cast Prosh, Sky Raider of Care. I create 6 Kobold of Care keep tokens with Prosh's ability, and then cast Carrion Feeder for good measure. Out of mana, I discard down to 7 and pass to Chris.
Chris draws and casts the Chord of Calling from the top of his library, where X equals 2. He searches his library for Dockside Extortionist, putting the Goblin into play, and creates 30 treasure tokens with his ETB. Now that's a lot of swag. Making the most of his newly found mana, Chris casts Rhystic Study, and recasts his commander for the 4th time. Next he taps Kalamax with Survivor's Encampment, and casts Gush, triggering his Dinosaur's ability. Chris puts a +1/+1 counter on his commander, copies the spell, and draws 4 cards. Not yet finished, he casts Reap, and Angelo responds by discarding a land to retrace the Una's Grace in his graveyard. He chooses not to pay for Rhystic Study, allowing Chris to draw a card, puts a charge counter on Primal Amulet, and copies the spell with Sevinne's ability. Angelo then draws 2 cards and discards another land to retrace Una's Grace once more. Chris draws another card from his study, Angelo draws a card, and Angelo retraces the spell for a 3rd time. Chris draws, Angelo draws, and Angelo once again retraces Una's Grace. How many lands does he have in his hand? Chris draws, and Angelo casts the negate that he just drew, targeting the Reap that Chris put onto the stack oh so long ago. Really wanting his spell to resolve, Chris casts Swan Song, and all of us forget that Teferi would have prevented this. Big oops. Swan Song counters the counter spell, and Angelo is compensated with a 2/2 bird token for his troubles. Angelo then flips his Primal Amulet into Primal Wellspring, creates 5 servos with Saheeli's triggers, but forgets to deal 5 damage with his Ral triggers. Reap then finally resolves, and Chris returns Beast Within and Seaborn Muse to his hand. He then casts the Muse, followed by Beast Within, destroying Teferi and creating Angelo a 3/3 beast token. Not yet finished, Chris plays an island as his land for turn, and casts Llanowar Elves, Fineheart Elves, Birds of Paradise, and Elvish Mystic. Somebody certainly has a thing for mana dorks. With nothing more to do, Chris discards down to 7 and passes the turn. I float 4 mana through Crucifix and then proceed to my untap step.
Chris untaps his board thanks to Seedborn Muse, and Alex plays a Swamp. Alex then recasts his commander, allowing Chris to draw, and ends his turn. Chris responds to this by tapping his commander with Survivor's Encampment and casts Mog's Salvage. He puts a +1/+1 counter on Kalamax, copies the spell, and destroys Angelo's Skull Clamp and Soul Ring. Angelo then moves to his turn.
Chris untaps his permanent in Angelo's untapped step, and Angelo plays Flooded Strand. Next he casts Sevinne's Reclamation, copying the spell with his Primal Wellspring, and paying for the Ristic Study tax. Raoul triggers twice, Saheeli triggers once, and Chris responds by tapping his commander to cast Crop Rotation. He puts a +1/+1 counter on the dinosaur, copies the spell, and sacrifices a forest before searching his library for 2 lands and putting them into play. Raoul then deals 2 damage to Chris, Saheeli makes a servo, and Sevinne's Reclamation returns Soul Ring and Teferi Time Raveler to the battlefield. Not yet finished, Angelo casts Raoul, Izzet Viceroy, paying 1 for Ristic Study. He makes a servo with Saheeli, and then uses the newly played Raoul's -3 ability to deal lethal damage to Seaborn Muse. Next, Angelo activates Teferi's -3 ability, returning Kalamax to Chris's hand, and draws a card. Not yet finished activating loyalty abilities, Angelo uses Raoul Storm's Conduit +2 ability to scry the top card of his library to the bottom, and then flashes back the Faithless Looting in his graveyard, paying for the study. Sevinne copies the spell, causing Angelo to draw 2, discard 2, draw 2 more, and discard 2 more. Raoul triggers twice, dealing 2 damage to Chris, and Saheeli triggers, creating another servo. With nothing more to do, Angelo passes to Martin.
I begin my turn by casting Liliana, Dreadhorde General, and use her +1 ability to make a 2/2 zombie token. Moving to combat, I attack Chris with Prosh, and he blocks my dragon with his Birds of Paradise. Unable to do anything else, I pass the turn.
Chris plays Exotic Orchard, and recasts his commander once again. Next he equips his Lightning Greaves to the dinosaur, and casts a Raoul Storm Conduit of his own. I'm going to go ahead and blame Teferi for the fact that there are 3 Raouls in play at the same time. Seems like the kind of time paradoxical event that he would cause. Chris then activates his Raoul's +2 ability, scrolling the top card of his library to the bottom, and then casts Double Vision, because copying spells once is just not enough. Still not finished, he taps Kalamax to add a green to his mana pool, and casts Artifact Mutation. He puts a +1/+1 counter on his commander, copying the spell twice, and deals lethal damage to Teferi and Raoul Izzet Viceroy with his Raoul's ability. Well, that's 1 less Raoul to deal with, I suppose. The spell is then resolved, destroying Angelo's Arcane Signet, Talisman of Creativity, and Boreal Signet. Chris makes 6 1/1 Saplings, casts Sylvan Library, and ends his turn.
Alex starts his turn by casting Pemin's Aura, targeting his commander and paying for the Ristic Study tax. Sensing an incoming infinite combo, Angelo pays a life and sacrifices Flooded Strand, putting Tundra into play from his library. Next he casts Cyclonic Rift, targeting the Nightmare Hydra, and Alex responds by casting Power Sink, where X is 6. The Rift is countered, Zaxara creates a 0/0 Hydra that enters with 6 +1/+1 counters, and the aura resolves. Alex then proceeds to make infinite mana by tapping Zaxara for 2 and untapping them for 1 with his aura. He then casts Exsanguinate where X is 100, and I respond by sacrificing all of my creatures to Carrion Feeder, drawing a lot of cards with Liliana. Sadly, I am unable to find an answer to Alex's spell, and Angelo, Chris and myself all lose 100 life, leaving Alex as the victor. Well, that's it for another game. Thank you so much to Angelo and Chris for joining us. We can't wait to hang out with you both again in the future. Don't forget that you can help to support the channel in 4 quick and easy ways. Liking the video, hitting that bell icon, leaving us a comment, and hitting that subscribe button. We are so close to reaching 10,000 subs, and it would really mean a lot to us if you helped us get there before 2021. And if you really want to help support the channel, then consider checking out our Patreon link, where you can find exclusive rewards and goodies. That's all for now though, we'll see you next time.